for joining us. We're really excited to have you. I was so floored this morning when I was talking to Nicole about how many people we had sign up for this series, and just it's just really cool. And I think it speaks to the fact that people are really excited to learn about how to talk about their science. So we'll give people some time to come on in. At some point, we are going to have to figure out the background music, I feel like, for these events. Yeah, like we need something other than like our Bluetooth speakers like playing something in our backgrounds. We'll figure it out eventually.
Little elevator music.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I actually had a
Mhm.
calling job, and so I at one point in my life, and so I got to listen to a lot of elevator music.
Oh, that's fun. When we do our phone banking, there's no music while you wait, and I feel like there totally should be.
There should
Like
be. There has to be.
that would that would be such a fabulous addition to their program, to their software. Hi, everyone. We're just going to do a couple more minutes to allow for more people to join, and we'll probably start here at like 1:03. I feel like that's a good time to jump off, and we'll have a little bit of an intro before we jump into the meat of the session. So thank you all so much for joining us. Super, super appreciate you taking the time out of your day on a Wednesday to make it happen. Quinn, I see you in the attendees list. I bet that we are quite close to one another in physical location despite being on virtual. You guys can see I'm in my lab because I am also still a PhD student or candidate, excuse me. I'm ABD. All right. All right, we'll give it just a couple more minutes. Sorry. Okay. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. And people who come in can come in. Thank you all again so much for joining us today. We are delighted to have Dr. Rebecca here with some of our, well, actually, with our base building team, our full timers on our base building team, Nicole, Jess, and Janelle. My name is Colette Delawala. I'm the founder and CEO of Stand Up for Science. And I'm just really excited to be getting to do some of these more like training types of events that are virtual like this. And one of the things that the team late last year, we sort of sat down and we were thinking about 2026 and taking into consideration the feedback that we had received from members of our community about, what would be valuable like resources that we could provide to the scientific community. And one of the things was like, yes, people understand that they need to have conversations and they need to make their science accessible. And I think that people like all of you guys here, want to do that. And at the same time, there is like they don't necessarily write a whole lot of books on the soft skills that come with presenting your science, especially if it's super technical, in ways that people will understand. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing is that actually talking about what we do as scientists, and not necessarily how the sausage is made, so to speak, but like what our science is, what we bring to the table in the work that we do is really important for the public to understand. Because if we don't talk about it, then how is anybody going to know? So we are just delighted to have Dr. Rebecca here doing a two-part series with us. Today, we're going to be focusing on sort of a public speaking and storytelling of science. Our next one is going to be a little bit more on the like one-on-one soft skills of talking about science. So yes, thank you, Dr. Rebecca. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to pass it off to Nicole.
Thanks, Colette. I'm Nicole Kuiper. Yes, the base building director here, and just a few, logistical things. Before I turn it over to Dr. Rebecca Mellema, who was so gracious enough to volunteer her services to us. And we're delighted when everyone gets to benefit from one of our volunteers. So I want you to know that we are going to share the resources that she shared. She shared a really long, great list of people to follow that are great science communicators. We also will share the slides. This training is going to be available on YouTube. And at the end, I really ask you to stay on. We have a simple three question poll that we'd love to get your responses on to help us with our future programming. So I was going to give a nice intro to Dr. Rebecca Mellema here, but she does a really great job at introducing herself. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
All right, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be talking with everyone today. So, welcome. Hello, there we go. I had to click the actual screen. I know how to do PowerPoint even after all of the COVID. So today's talk is how to talk to anyone but a scientist. And as I said, my name is Dr. Rebecca Mellema, and you're all probably looking at your screens, nodding along, and you're probably thinking, who the heck is this lady? So, quick introduction to myself. I am a recent graduate from the University of Utah, specifically the Petrey Lab. I got a PhD in microbiology and immunology. During my time in my PhD program, I did complete a competitive science communication fellowship, much of which you're going to learn about today. A lot of the resources that I have was also what I shared with Stand Up for Science. You're going to be getting in less than an hour about maybe 8 weeks worth of training, and that's not even going to cover all of it. Also, I have done plenty of science communication outreach that focuses on storytelling. So here I'm with my friends at Science and Sorcery, and we are using tabletop role-playing games and improvisation in order to discuss science research and really cool science topics. And then I have also been, since 2019, running my own blog called Getting the Science Right, which is where I explore science topics and science research through the lens of like science fiction and fantasy tropes. Also, I am a theater nerd. Represent. Woo! So today, we're going to be having a very specific focus on story structure and public speaking. I will be discussing writing at the very end. It's not going to have as big of a section. However, I do want to emphasize that pretty much everything I'm going to be discussing about story structure and public speaking can also apply to writing. So even if that section isn't as big as some of the other ones that I'm going to be talking about, everything except for like how to stand in front of a microphone situation can be applied to the writing. All right. So, I can see a little bit of emojis over here. Can everyone like say yay or nay if they've seen this type of structure before, which are the modes of persuasion? Okay, some of you, I see some of you have seen it. So this here is what we use in order to persuade people to our side of the of science or our side of the argument. And what we in science really like to focus on are these two over here. Logos, which is appealing to logic. Those are all of our data points. Those are all of the statistical analysis that we've done. But then we also have the ethos, which is, I have a PhD, I've done this for 6 years, or I have completed a postdoc in this field, I know what I'm talking about. So this really works when we're talking to other scientists. Unfortunately, this doesn't work nearly as well when you're talking to people who are not scientists. In fact, they focus on pathos, which is appealing to emotion and passion first. That doesn't mean you can't compel someone with logos and ethos, but a lot of the communication is you appealing to their passion first. And then And then you can do other things. But throughout the whole talk, if you ask, why are we doing it this way? Why are we thinking about communication this way? The answer is pretty much always going to be we're appealing to someone's pathos. So this is a really, really quick workshop or an exercise. I want you right now to write down about one or two sentences explaining your research. You can either write it down in front of you or you can write it down in the chat. Might take someone a little bit of time if we want people to try that. You can also maybe type it out on notes, is what I've done before. Just gonna give 1 minute for this. Okay, yeah, we got one. Mhm. All right, I'm seeing some. These are good. Awesome. So, for a little bit of the sake of time, we're going to go to the next part, which is take a look at your description. Do you think someone in another field could understand what your description is? For some of you I see in the chat, absolutely. For others, not so much. And that's not because you haven't done a great job describing it. It's that usually we are packaging our science in very specific words that are very specific to our field. There's actually quite a few studies out there that have shown that modern day science vocabulary is really nonsensical to people outside of the field. And so take your sentence and we're going to try to do something that's actually incredibly hard. I want you to try to rewrite it without using any scientific jargon. And jargon is just the specialized language that we use. And that includes mitochondria, statistics, bacteriophage, etc. And so what you're trying to do is like make CRISPR is now tiny scissors. Genes are now the stuff that makes you you. Give maybe another minute for that if people want to take a stab at it. That's great. I study how hollow bones in birds have changed through time. Every single one of those words is understandable to someone outside of science. Nice. I'm going to give just a little bit more time. I like what I'm seeing here. Okay, I'm going to move on just for the sake of time, but this is a fantastic exercise that I do want everyone to do because if we can't communicate between other scientists, what do you think it's like for someone outside of science? So this is a fantastic exercise that we should be doing for different parts of our research. Ultimately, your goal, and this is hard, should be understood by a second grader. That is your baseline for when you're trying to develop your how you're going to discuss your research. You can alter your explanation depending on the audience, but you should try to get a baseline explanation that you start with. Okay, so let's talk about stories. Let's talk about story structure. Stories and storytelling are one of the oldest, if not the oldest, form of art. It is also how people have traditionally passed down information. Like that, like long stories between generations is how people have passed on knowledge about where is it safe to go exploring? What are the safe practices for XYZ? This is one of the reasons why people like anecdotes. It is one of those things where it's actually more powerful to tell a story about someone, a single person, than it is to share statistics, even though the statistics are technically a more powerful data point. They're going to listen to anecdotes more just because I would argue that we are wired for picking up information that's packaged in stories. Just because that's how we've done it and that's how we've survived for so long since the beginning of culture. So let's talk about how we're going to use it to our benefit. Story structure is something that we can all use in discussing our science. This is the basics of basics for story structure. You'll see here that effectively I have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So at the very beginning, I have what is the hook and or the background, and then we run into the inciting incident, which is the thing that sets off our story. It is the plot. And then we have the rising action, which is where we have a series of events that build on top of each other, and it increases the tension and the stakes usually to where we get to what we call the climax, which is where everything comes together or falls apart, depending on what type of story you're telling. And then we have what is called the falling action afterwards, which is the denouement, or it is the, what happens after? Do they get a happily ever after or not? Is there a wedding, etc. This is a very basic story structure that we're going to then look at what are the different flavors of this. Now, I don't have a specific slide on this, but I did want to talk a little bit about what a hook is and how that leads into the background. Especially in today's day, we have about maybe 15 to 30 seconds in terms of public speaking, and then for writing, we have maybe a paragraph to really catch someone's attention and then bring them along with us. So the hook is what we use to say, hey, eyes on me. Pay attention to me. And then once you have everyone's eyes on you, then you can bring them along in your story. The one hook that I used earlier was the little, poking fun at myself joke, which is, who the heck is this lady? That was my hook. And that probably made you laugh. Telling a joke is a great way to hook people. You can also maybe appeal to one of their five senses, make them smell something at the beginning. I've also heard tale of someone coming into a talk wearing a costume. There's many ways to create hooks, but the hook is where you go, pay attention to me, and then you go into the background. And you have to quickly set up the setting. But because the hook is there's many ways to do the hook, I'm not going to put a specific slide on it. Okay. So if you are from the University of Utah and you've maybe gone to one of my little series, you may have seen this. This is using a mystery or a murder mystery structure to talk about data. If you've ever seen any Agatha Christie movies or novels, if you've ever seen Knives Out, Glass Onion, those are all whodunits, and they follow a very specific structure that you can steal for talking about data, where you first have your intro, who, what, where, and why, what might be a possible motive, and within that intro is where the murder happens, and then you have the hypothesis, this probably happened because of this, and then you move on to your first clue, really discuss that first clue, and then it modifies your hypothesis. Move on to the second clue, modify your hypothesis, and then at the very end, the butler did it. It's always the butler, I don't know why. But again, we can steal it for when we're talking about a bunch of data points and how we got from point A to point B. To be honest, though, this is probably not the story structure that you're going to use when you're talking at to a layman audience. You're probably going to be talking about more general things, so you may not be able to get into the data that much. So what can we use? Well, there's something called a hero's journey. And the hero's journey is where you pick a character. Choose a character. Maybe it's yourself. Maybe it's your lab mate. Maybe it's even the disease you're studying. But you need to choose a character that the audience can latch onto and feel empathy for. And then you have them go on an adventure where you go from what is known into the unknown, where you go through trials and tribulations, all those assays that didn't work, or all the times you got the grant, you couldn't get the grants, it got rejected. And then at the very end, you are able to come back into quote unquote the unknown and you go, the character has now changed. And this is a great way to talk about your story in science. This is like, how have I changed going through a PhD, or how have I changed going through this process of research? This is a fantastic way, and it centers usually a person, but you can again use it for other things like I hinted at. You can maybe even make it a molecule. There's many ways to hijack it. Okay, but let's say you actually want to talk about molecules. You can use the hero's journey, but there's another one you might be able to use, which is called the romance or the buddy cop story structure. They're the exact same. I'm sorry if I just uh, changed how you see buddy cop movies, but they're functionally the same to where you have your background and then you have the inciting incident, which is what we call the meet cute. The molecules see each other from across the room. They might be a good fit. And so then you have the rising action, depending on what you're studying. And then you usually have at the right before the climax, you have what is the breakup. Things fall apart. It always happens right before the big climax. The molecules are unable to stay together. But then you have the reunion, and they're able to fit perfectly together. The enzyme function happens, and it's great. And then you have the denouement, which is the promise of more adventures. And this is really good if you want to, like, personifying things is a fantastic tool that we can use to our advantage. And this is what this buddy cop structure can do is like take things at a molecular level and maybe personify them a bit. And people will latch on to that. So you're going to have to think about what is your story structure, though, for your research. It will depend. So first you have to choose who are your characters. You, lab mates, etc. Choose the goal. What is the climax that you're going to go for? And then you can choose the story structure that I went through. I didn't have enough time to talk about the heist story structure, but that is just Ocean's 11, where it's gathering the crew to do a big thing, and you pull it off. I mean, you can like go watch Ocean's 11. It's great in general, but that also just tells you like the basic story points. And then you have choose the tone, comedy, serious, etc. And that can all help you shape what your story structure will be. And again, this is a great way to package really intense science into a form that everyone outside of science recognizes and will internalize. So, one of the really cool things that my fellowship provided me was a like very basic exercise for figuring out what is your story. And this is the one of the Pixar tools that they gave us, which is once upon a time there was a fill in the character. Every day, this was the norm. And then one day, this was the inciting incident. Because of that, things happened until finally the climax. Something big happened. And then ever since that day, this is the falling action. This is a really good like fill in the blank for you to use when you're trying to figure it out. Now, there are actually 22 rules of Pixar storytelling that you can look at. We don't have time to go through all 22, obviously, but it is a fantastic tool that you should all go through. This structure here is also a great way for you to just use as a elevator pitch, where you can just like, this is what I'm going to tell someone and how I describe my science in any situation. So if you have this down, you have your elevator pitch down effectively. And again, what I want to stress, when you're structuring this initially, try to make it understandable to a second grader, and then it can be expounded upon. And then lastly, try to use short sentences, not because we're trying to take out all of the data, but we're trying to quote unquote trim the fat of your research to figure out what is like the core of your research that you need to tell. So using short sentences, if you can, is a great way to try to uh, figure out what is really the thing you're trying to package. What do you really want people to know? Okay. Now we're on to public speaking. Now, after you've taken that time to structure all of your science and you're like, I have a fantastic story and I want to tell it to the world. Now we're going to talk about public speaking. So that you can tell your story. And here's the thing, we in STEM all have to do public speaking at some point. Lab meetings. Yeah, we've all done them. Or maybe talking about your work in progress. We just don't get a lot of training on it, unfortunately. So, starting with the number one tip of public speaking that I know we already do, practice. I cannot stress enough that you need to practice whatever you're going to be public speaking so many times that you don't need a script. Uh, I know that when you've probably been trained in front of like a huge crowd, you probably are used to having the notes in your PowerPoint. I mean, for me right now, I don't even have any notes. I've practiced this enough to where I just know the beats of what I'm telling. And I also know my script well enough that I can kind of work off of that depending on my audience. But the practice to where you know it by heart is something that thespians do as well. And it is something that we need to do for our presentations, no matter what audience we have. So take practice seriously. When I was doing my thesis defense, I think I practiced my thesis defense a total of 8 hours. I was taking it that seriously. So let's talk about when you're standing up in front of people. My entire body is my instrument. In fact, that's why I have this set up the way I am for this presentation. I'm making sure I am standing to where I have the best use of my voice. So first, you need to treat your entire instrument with the respect it deserves. So before you talk, water, you need water for this. And then also try to do like warm-ups, stretch out beforehand, move your lips a bit before you start talking. Your body will thank you for it because public speaking is a whole body event. And then let's get your body ready. You're going to stand in quote unquote the power pose, which is imagine what, Wonder Woman looks like or Superman looks like. Choose your favorite superhero. It's that power pose. And it will make you feel silly. However, this is fantastic practice for where you need to put parts of your body. For example, the power pose focuses your shoulders down and back to where it opens up your chest. This is incredibly important because the more airs you have, the more support your voice gets. It also will raise your chin. And again, the more you can protect your vocal cords, the better. And so don't like tilt your chin down or don't put it up too high. You're going to try to keep your chin to where your voice and your vocal cords are not crushed. Okay? The power pose also does this fantastic thing of planting you in a way that makes you face your audience. And you're going to keep your feet planted. The reason being is because if you turn your body to point at something or to look at something, you're always going to come back center and face your audience. And I cannot stress that enough. Face your audience when you are doing public speaking. Like when you're pointing to something, I try to point like this. I try to keep my face towards the audience. Or if I do, I just do it briefly and then I come back. Briefly and then I come back. Many people make the mistake of just turning and facing away, even if you have a microphone in front of you. you need to keep facing the audience. The microphone is just a way to amplify your voice, but this is another powerful tool of public speaking is your face. And that is what people will appreciate when you're talking to them. If you can keep your face towards someone, towards the audience, they will appreciate it. And then finally, we have your lips, which are another part of this whole instrument. You're going to feel like you're over enunciating. In fact, I want you to practice, when you're doing all that practice over enunciating, mainly because when we're talking face to face, you get away with mumbling because we're close enough that we don't need it. When you're doing public speaking, you can't get away with mumbling, even with a microphone. Okay? So, like even if you have the tools, you need to over enunciate as much as you can. And then what they told us during my fellowship, they said use a mystical campfire tone, which honestly just translates to be a bit more like when you say slower, you say slowly. You drag it out. Or if you're talking about speed and like something is picking up, you start to use a bit more staccato in your voice to make it go. And so it's just like the little tools that you would use around a campfire to emphasize your storytelling. And it is very, very great at just like em helping you tell your story through just how fast you're talking. And you'll see I have my little be dramatic, be dramatic. That's what the fellowship kept like racking into our heads. Okay. And then we've talked about like rhythm. You definitely use volume. You're going to be louder than you're comfortable with. That's okay, but you're going to need it for vocal support. You're going to have to be louder than you would be in any space you would be comfortable in. And then we have pauses. When you're talking to any audience, but especially one that's not in the science backgrounds, you need to use the pauses to let them think on it. Give them a space to breathe because you're probably putting, like, even if you're cutting down all your research, you're going to be bombarding them with new information that they are not familiar with. So take a breath, maybe use that opportunity to take a drink, and then keep going. All right, so you've gotten some practice in, you've gotten, your story written out. Great. Now let's talk about when you're actually on a roll. When you are talking to your audience, again, I cannot emphasize enough, even if it's a non-scientist, even if they are people who you know don't like you, you will not talk down to them and you will not use your fancy science language to try to get a one-up on them. You need to think about this as you need a code switch for your audience. That's a linguistic term where you're taking the same information, but instead of using, again, your science terms, you're going to repackage it into a new dialect that is appropriate for your audience. But if you use too much science language, that sometimes it comes across that you're going to be talking down to them. Yes, it's frustrating, but it's the reality of the world we're living in right now. Also, throughout your talk, try to make jokes. Making people laugh is a great way to keep them engaged. The more that they laugh, the more that they're going to be like leaning on every word that you say. You don't have to make it into a stand-up comedy, but you can throw in a few jokes here and there. It's not going to hurt your presentation. It's not going to hurt your storytelling. And then, kind of like what I did at the beginning, we can use questions to directly interact with the audience. Kind of, feel free to point to someone in the audience and say, what is your favorite science fact? Obviously, when you're talking to a non-science audience, try to throw them very easy curveballs so that they don't feel like a fool in front of the entire audience. Like making someone feel like a fool is probably the worst mistake you can make. But what you're trying to do is bring them into the conversation. All right. And there are a couple of other things that we can use. And again, this applies to writing as well. Try to use the five senses when you're doing your story. Your taste, the touch, smell, sight, sound, etc. What I like to do for some of my past presentations is that when I'm talking about inflammatory bowel disease, I will tell the audience that I want them to imagine like a hot ember that is burning a hole in their gut. Maybe you take time to describe how the media smells and how it burns your nose a little bit. Or maybe you want to talk about like what a centrifuge sounds like, how it rocks back and forth click, 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 as it starts to become unbalanced. Those are great, just little tools that you can just slip into your talk. And people love them. People like even science audiences love them. This is like things you don't have to use just for a non-science audience as well. So then we come on to analogies, which are similes or metaphors, which is where you're describing things that are like something else. Please use them. This is just, again, in general, we need to describe things in science that are like things in non-science spaces. For example, when I'm talking about my research, what I studied, I would say hyaluronan, which is this great big sugar. It's going to grow like a well-watered lawn. Everyone in the audience will immediately picture what that looks like. I don't have to prompt them for anything else, but they immediately go, I get the idea, just from that little simile. So I know I'm giving you quite a bit of homework, but this would be one where it's like, what similes and metaphors can I use to describe my own science? And then using strong verbs as you're talking. We definitely have a propensity to use, utilize. I uh, use, like we use very specific verbs in science that quite frankly are boring to the public. So you didn't find something. Let's change that verb. You investigated. You delved. You established. You disentangled. You, I don't know, fought your cells for DNA. That's one thing that could possibly happen. But again, like you're choosing things that are much more exciting than what we would use in any sort of like scientific fields. Like, you can think about it. And then I also want to just spend just a brief moment on the talk of passive voice, which many people in STEM have probably heard and have demonized a little bit. Passive voice is not your enemy, it's just that we overuse it. So the passive voice just means if I would say the media was spun, if I can put the like phrase by dinosaurs afterwards, that's passive voice. What happens is that like if you use too much of that, the media was spun, the cells were taken. The thing is that like there's actually a lack of action there, and people like it's something that people just start to tune out to if you use too much of it. It is useful though if you want to shake up like the rhythm of your words or you want to like change things a little bit. So I'm not saying don't use passive voice, but you need to be aware that if you use it too much, your audience starts to tune out. So again, check if you say something and then you can immediately follow it by dinosaurs, it's passive. All right. So we've talked about in general the public speaking. I'm unfortunately not going to talk about like how to like make a climax of your work because it really depends on what your research is. You maybe we can talk individually afterwards, but I want to spend a little bit of time on writing and take everything that I've said from the other parts of the um discussion, but the best way to do writing is to practice writing, and there are a couple of starting points that you can look at. The first thing you can do is actually write, layman summaries for your lab research. Just do it for your lab right now. But you want to try to do it in a story structure where you have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Like this is great practice. If that's not your jam, then might be a time to start writing a blog and see like what sticks with people. Again, maybe you want to write to your local news station. You make a local NPR station. There are also a ton of free writing classes online. This one that I have up here is, the free Stanford Writing in the Sciences. This is very specific to like science writing, like writing for a grant or whatnot. However, this is a fantastic course that I still went through and I still highly recommend because it does talk to you about like how to strengthen your sentences and your writing on a like line by line level. So this is a fantastic source. But yes, the best way to practice to like really get good at writing is to practice. All right, and then if you're like, well, I want a bit more, I do have some of that provided to Stand Up for Science. However, I want to give a quick shout out to what I would call my Bible, which is Writing Science in Plain English. I love this book. This tells you how to effectively not only write for science topics, but also how to edit a little bit. Also, if you're trying to figure out how to maybe repackage your science in a way that is much more digestible, several short sentences about writing is another great resource that I highly recommend. But again, that is provided to Stand Up for Science. I just wanted to give a shout out for my favorite writing books. All right, I am coming to the end of my talk, and if you want to talk a bit more, I do have some of this for on you can just check out my website there through the QR code through the RebeccaMellema.com. You can also contact me through that email there if you want to talk a bit more and like discuss what might be a good way for you to, package your science. Just feel free to contact me. Just, please do. And I will be seeing you all hopefully next time where we discuss how to make friends and influence people as scientists, because this talk here is kind of giving you the baseline for what you need to just talk about science in general. But this next one is going to be specifically the face-to-face work, and I would actually call the incredibly important groundwork that we need to start doing for as scientists. It is going to be how do you go up to someone and they're going to maybe be reticent about learning about science, or they are maybe a little bit in denial about science, or they've gone down a wrong path, whatever you want to say. And this is like the face-to-face techniques that we can go through. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time. So that is the end of my talk. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Rebecca. I was so impressed with what you were able to convey in such a short period of time. And so, yeah, I really appreciate it. I want to encourage folks to use the chat or the Q&A function to put any questions. We made this a webinar because we had a very large number of registrants and we had a smaller audience, which is normal, but so maybe we could figure out how to unmute folks, but here we go. We have one question. Let's see what we got here.
Okay.
Can you see the questions, Rebecca, or would you like me to read it out for you?
I have the chat up. I don't know if it's the question, so I don't have like
Yeah.
the Q&A part.
Yeah, let me read it for you. So this is from Miriam,
Mhm.
and it says, I volunteer with www.defendpublichealth.org to push back on the health disinformation coming from the current leaders of HHS, FDA, and NIH. I am particularly interested in how to pre-bunk and debunk mis/disinformation without being so technical that people don't listen. It's a challenge because those guys are lying, trust me. There are lots of data to show I'm right, end quote. Doesn't feel very persuasive. And you're right, Miriam, because we know, especially with like vaccines, it doesn't work. But, quote, let me explain a complicated lit review and data analysis to you, doesn't work either. And then Quinn added on, this could be a whole webinar by itself.
So I do have, okay, so there was quite a bit in there.
Yeah.
Are you asking about what is the best, wait, is it face to face or are you trying to go after a whole organization? Because those are two very different questions.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about not face to face, she said.
Mhm. Not face to face. So this is, I will be talking more about this in the next one. Kind of like how do we approach disinformation? Because disinformation tends to, firstly, the people talking about disinformation, like they're the one disseminating it, they are very good at recognizing what is wrong in someone's life. And like what they actually have I'm not going to say empathy, but let's say they have a like emotional understanding to where they know what will make someone listen to them. And a lot of times it's showing, I'm going to use air quotes, empathy. And so that's one of the reasons why people will listen to that in the first place. And so unfortunately, the answer that I will have for in general, if you want to start talking about like try to change someone, you have to go, I understand what like maybe made you decide to go down this route. Because again, unfortunately, the data is not, they're not going to be listening to you initially. The trick is to, again, appeal to their pathos and appeal to make them feel good. And I know this is very frustrating, but it's like you need to make them feel good and they need to like you. And then you can start talking to them about data. But first, you have to get past the first barrier of just like, I need you to like me. Which means if you like me, you trust me. And that's incredibly hard. And like, there's no way other than to just practice the essentially target, like understanding what, based on what you're hearing when you're like looking at their posts or whatnot, it's like, what is maybe the key issue that you're afraid of? And then you can address it. It's very difficult. And like, I can talk about it more in the next webinar.
Yeah. So again, and she added another, not sure that RFK Jr. makes me sad is going to work, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it is very hard to think about pushing back against people on, social media and news stories when their reality is, they've been listening to, let's say, vaccine conspiracy theories, or, they have a child that they believe suffered a vaccine injury.
So what
Um,
that goes, yeah, so I do have to jump into that.
yeah.
So what that like vaccine stuff, that fundamentally comes from a place where people want to protect their children.
Mhm.
And so unfortunately, like people have like figured out we can target what is actually a very human emotion and we can I hate to say it, but it's like we manipulate that genuine fear. And then when the scientists come out, I have to say it, we have kind of mishandled how that works. Rather than going, I understand you are, this is hard, but it's like, I understand where you're coming from. You want to protect your children, etc. Rather than we just go like, you're wrong. You don't understand, you're stupid, which people then turn away from the people who are making them feel bad. And they're going to go towards the people who are making them feel like good parents.
Yeah.
And we have to be really cognizant that we as a science community have kind of, we have not caused it to happen, but we sure as heck haven't helped.
Yeah. Very, very true. EFET era asks, what are some popular science communicators that you find authentic and you feel personally inspired by? And I know I do have a big long list, but I also
Yes.
wanted to pose the question to you. So
Yes. So I will let you all in on a secret. Most science communicators are going to be their authentic selves because you you don't like go out and essentially say, "Hey, I'm going to talk science to people," especially in this day and age. And sometimes you are just your authentic self to make the experience really happy for yourself. So I'm happy to say that most science communicators are just fantastic. One of the ones that really has inspired me specifically, Dr. Simon Clark. He is based in the UK and he is a climate scientist. And he is just a fantastic storyteller in general, but he has done just uh, some fantastic science communication that I was inspired by when I found him, and so led me to start delving into other parts of science communication that I would not have thought of. But yes, I have a long list though of people. But I have to say Dr. Simon Clark though, just because he is so influential in what I think of.
great. All right. And let's see. Chris Fisher posed a question. I'd love to hear your thoughts about communicating uncertainty. It's something our community gets implicitly, but that the public health tends to struggle with, or that the public, I'm sorry, tends to struggle with. We saw during COVID that not communicating uncertainty effectively can lead to downstream consequences that misinformation spreaders often leap on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a tough one. Uh, so first we have to acknowledge that in our culture, we, and I'll talk about this in the next webinar, so don't worry. But in our culture, we are afraid and we hate uncertainty just in our culture in general. And some of this is true in many cultures, like every single culture will have like some stories about, oh, there's, I'm gonna exaggerate a little bit, but like evil in the woods because we don't know what's in the woods, so we're going to just like embody it. So even in our culture, though, even with all that we know, that fear is still very prevalent. And so we have to first acknowledge that most people are terrified of not knowing. And then when we present it, usually as we do in science, we usually just present it as like, well, yeah, we don't know, da 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 da, and we don't package it in any other way, which, people are going to react to the unknown like they have been trained to react to the unknown, which is fear. So what I like to do and what I was trained to do is that you repackage it, where you go, this is exciting, or this is fascinating, or this, and like you have, it's really hard, and I can again talk about it more in the next webinar, but it is a repackaging trick to where you go, this is no longer scary. This is actually something like it's the next frontier if you want to go Star Trek, or it's like, the new world that they're studying. So you like go it's more now more an exploring situation, which we don't actually do when you see people try to talk science and they bring up the uncertainty. So it's tough, and I will talk more about like some great ways to repackage that.
Well, great. Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any new questions. I am for one very much looking forward to your next session. To me, this is all really about the creativity that a lot of us devote to the work we're doing, but like not to the actual communication of it. And so really
Oh,
it's
Chris,
yep,
there's
go
a
ahead.
question from Chris in the Q&A. I can't see it.
That's the one you just
Oh,
answered.
sorry. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But it's akin to, when you think about data visualization and like what's the story you want to tell with these data, and you don't just throw everything necessarily in a bar chart, right? It's like, or what are you going to highlight? Things like that. It's like you really have to be thoughtful and think about it. And this is very much the same way, but even more challenging, I think, since a lot of us, the creative writing has been drilled out of us because we've been learned to be so technical. So. Great. I love uncertainty. That's why I'm in science. Yes, Kathleen. Kathleen, you also had a really good um, point up here that sometimes universities may regulate how much you reach out to the media. So be careful with sending things to newspapers. And I just want to say you can
You
always.
can do you can do opinions. So you as a single person, you do not have to speak from, yeah. So that is something very important. You do not have to speak for your university, but you can say, as someone who is an individual in the United States, I can write an opinion piece. And actually, I know quite a few of my friends have done so. So you can still do it. You just can't unfortunately package it as a like I'm again, you're trying though to appeal to people's pathos rather than like your ethos. So I don't think that that's a bad thing to think about. People do value the opinion pages.
Great. All right. Well, we've lost a few people to
Oh yeah, time.
the questions, but I would love, Jess, if you could launch our poll. Just three quick questions, if you could answer for us, we'd really appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you, Dr. Rebecca. We really appreciate the time you took. And compiling all of this or compressing all of this from your larger session into this, because I still feel like there was a lot of value in what you shared. So thank you. And if everyone could answer these questions for us, it'll really help us. And we hope to see you next time. But I'm going to leave this up for just a few minutes and then we will sign off. Lots of thanks. Great talk in the chat,
Probably
Dr.
pull that up again.
Rebecca, and I 100% concur. We really appreciate you. We appreciate everybody joining, and we hope you have a wonderful week. And if you are involved in the March plans, look to hear from us. It is a busy time, but no time like the present to be thinking about how you communicate with the public. So hope to see you all soon and have a great rest of your day. Bye. Right. All right. All right. Well, Rebecca, you're still on.
Yes.
So far we had 16 out of 17 say they agree this training was a good use of my time. One person was unsure, but that's still great results. I gained information, skills, and resources I'll be able to use in my science advocacy. All 17 agreed.
Ooh.
And yeah, and then what other training? So yeah, we'll analyze those. That's more for us to kind of say, hey, what else would you like to know?
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks. I mean, this was fantastic. And oh, Jess, did you stop the streaming?
Yes, it's stopping right now.
Awesome. Okay. So great. Anything else? Yeah, I'm the only thing about your list is I'm making everything links so that the handles that you provided, and I just have a few more to go, and then I'll have
Oh,
that
okay.
finalized.
Sorry about
But
that.
and I made everything bullets too, so it compressed a little bit. But would you like to take a look at that before I send that out?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay. And then I have the other thing from University of Utah. I had them take a quick look at it. I think they took their names off of it, like Julie Kiefer and whatever. But oh, and she took the